Hi guys, my name is Emily. Welcome back to my channel. This is my channel, Em Reads, where we talk about books and reading and anything related to those topics. So thank you for being here. Today, I just kind of wanted to share some memoirs that I've read lately that maybe you would want to check out too. Nonfiction November is coming up in a couple weeks, and maybe these would be decent options for you to check out if you haven't read them before. I will say, I'm a little weird about audiobooks, I guess. I don't just listen to anything on audiobooks. I don't mind listening to I take things in better visually. I find when I listen to audiobooks, I'm a little more disengaged than if I'm reading a physical book or looking at my e-reader. But when it comes to audiobooks, I do like listening to memoirs, particularly when they are narrated by the author. I find that just kind of lends itself fairly well to an audiobook for me, and that I'm a little bit more engaged that way. And so I actually did listen to all of these on audiobook, and I think only 2 of them, three of them were not narrated by the author, and I'll kind of give you my thoughts on whether or not I think that worked or not. But yeah, so let's just talk about these memoirs. The first one I read was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. And this memoir was really, really popular when it first came out a year or 2 ago, I think. It was everywhere, really, really popular. Jeanette McCurdy was a child actress on Nickelodeon, I believe. I don't think she was on Disney Channel, or she might have been briefly, but either way, she was a child actress on TV. And this book is about her very toxic, very awful relationship with her mother, and the different phases they went through, and how she eventually tried to kind of break ties with her mother, and her mother's eventual death, and how she handled that. I'll say it's a very, in my opinion, depressing memoir. It doesn't leave you feeling warm and fuzzy. So maybe kind of gauge for yourself if you're in the right place to read that kind of memoir. But Jeanette McCurdy did do the narration herself, which I thought worked really, really well for this book. And the next one is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. Chanel Miller was the victim of an assault at Stanford University by Brock Turner about 10 years ago. And this is her memoir of that event and everything that came after, including the media storm and the litigation and all of it. I cannot recommend this memoir highly enough. I was stunned by how good it was. She was a wonderful writer. It was searing and raw, and I loved this book. It's a difficult book, but I loved it. It was wonderful. I will say, if you are a victim of any kind, this did, I hate to use the word trigger, but kind of touched me a little more deeply than I anticipated it doing. So maybe just keep that in mind. But I think this memoir is highly worth reading, and I highly, highly recommend it. Oh, and I should have mentioned, for Know My Name, Chanel Miller did do the narration herself as well, which was wonderful. The next one is a very well-known memoir for a long time, and that is Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain. Bourdain did do the narration himself, unsurprisingly, and it was great. It was great. It was really enjoyable. It was really sad to listen to since his death, but I really enjoyed it. It was fun, and his descriptions of people and place and food and cultures was just astounding. Bourdain has quite a way of describing things and really painting a picture for you and really bringing you into whatever pleasurable experience he's talking about. So I did really enjoy listening to it, particularly, I think. I don't know that it would have had quite the same effect on me if I had read it, because it was really enjoyable to listen to Bourdain narrate it himself. The next memoir is The Gospel Comes with a House Key by Rosaria Butterfield. And I guess this is a memoir, but Rosaria Butterfield was an atheist who eventually converted to Christianity through a series of events and relationships with people who became very, very dear to her. And essentially, she converted through people just being Christians just being incredibly hospitable and welcoming to her, despite her professed atheism and other things in her life. And she discusses her conversion and how that caused her to develop her own philosophy of radical hospitality. And she details that throughout the book. I will say there are some maybe slight issues I take with how radical her hospitality is, but those are just kind of personal quibbles. But it is a very good memoir, if that's something you're interested in. Okay, this one I really, really enjoyed. It is Shakespeare, The Man Who Pays the Rent by Judi Dench. Now, this book I think you should listen to on audio, perhaps, instead of reading it, because it is done in the style of an interview with Judi Dench. And so it works really well to listen to it because you kind of get the tone and inflection of the speakers. But it is Judi Dench discussing her career being involved in Shakespeare plays at various theater companies. And it is just fabulous to hear her tell little backstage stories and little tidbits here and there of all her experiences, and to discuss the plays themselves. So it was a really, really enjoyable experience. I will say Judi Dench does not narrate this audiobook herself, but the woman who does narrate it sounds nearly exactly like Judi Dench. So I don't think your experience would suffer for that fact. And these next two memoirs I actually have physical copies of because they were both technically rereads for me. I read the physical book for both of these some years ago and then reread them by listening to the audiobook. And the first one of those is Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance. I read this the first time when it was first published, before he had formally, I guess, entered the political sphere. And I reread it recently, maybe earlier this year, I think. And it was interesting, obviously, you know how you feel about people in politics, and you can make your own educated decision about whether or not this is something you want to read or not. But I do think it is interesting in the sense that it's evident that the quote-unquote American dream is still there, is still possible, but it's not possible without assistance. I think he's very clear that he would not have been able to achieve the things he did without the help of particular family members and things like the GI Bill and other government assistance. So it's just kind of an interesting take on some of those things. So do with that what you will. And the other one that I have a physical copy of is All Over But the Shoutin' by Rick Bragg. I read this for the first time when I was in high school. It was part of our reading in one of my high school English classes because I live in Alabama and Rick Bragg is an Alabamian, a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. And this memoir is about his childhood in Alabama, about his mother and his father and the rest of his family, and kind of his path through his career and how his upbringing shaped that and affected his trajectory and things. I love this book so much. I really, really love Bragg's writing. It evokes the South like almost nothing else I've ever read. And Bragg does not do the narration for this audiobook, but the man who does a really good job and also has a Southern accent, so it feels very appropriate and accurate. But I love this. If you've never read anything by Rick Bragg and you kind of want to get a flavor for him, and you're interested in Southern literature at all, I would really recommend this memoir. Okay, and another more recent memoir that I read was Be Ready When the Luck Happens by Ina Garten. And I did listen to this on audio, obviously, as well. And Ina does do the narration herself, which was great. And I wasn't sure how I would like this memoir or not. I love Ina and her cooking and all of that, but I wasn't sure how I would feel about the memoir. But I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed her discussion of her early career and those choices and how she just kind of sort of fell into things. Well, not fell into things, but, you know, just kind of almost wasn't afraid to make off-the-wall choices and things like that. And it was really, honestly, kind of inspiring in a way, but I really enjoyed listening to it. And of course, it was wonderful to hear about her talk. It was wonderful to hear her talk about her relationship with Jeffrey, and even though parts of the relationship are maybe a touch unconventional, it's great to see how they make all that work for them, and they're such a lovely couple. So this was a really enjoyable memoir to listen to. And another one was One Writer's Beginnings by Eudora Welty. And this is also one that I do recommend listening to on audiobook as well. I would like to read a physical copy one day, but I really liked listening to the audiobook of this because the memoir is a series of 3 lectures that she gave. And the audiobook is the live recording of those lectures. So it is her herself giving the lecture, and it's beautiful to listen to. It is Miss Welty talking about her upbringing in Mississippi and her family, particularly her relationship with her mother, and all the stories it entailed and how that childhood and upbringing made her the woman she is and allowed her to write the way that she does and the things that she does. It's a great, great memoir. It's rather short. The audiobook is only about 3 hours long, but I highly recommend listening to it. And the last is Through Gates of Splendor by Elizabeth Elliot. Elizabeth Elliot is a relatively well-known Christian author and writer, but this story tells about the events during the marriage to her first husband, Jim Elliot, and his unfortunate death. Jim Elliot, her husband, and a few other men were missionaries in, I believe, Ecuador, northern South America, but they were attempting to evangelize a tribe called the Alcas, who had not had any previous successful contact with people. They were known to be very violent and killed nearly anyone who came into contact with them. But Jim Elliot and the other men had had some success in making contact with them and having a few meetings, and they were set to have a larger meeting with more of the tribe when they were all killed. And this is the story of their missionary work in that country leading up to that event, and also the events of Elizabeth Elliot and the other wives, some of whom chose to go back to that country afterwards and continue working with the Alkas despite the tragedy that occurred. So it's a difficult story, an inspiring story, a convicting one, but it's something I wanted to listen to or wanted to read for a long time. And it is one that I say, I wish I had read it instead of listened to it. It was narrated by Alyssa Childers, whom I like listening to, but much of this memoir is told through letters and diaries. And sometimes in listening to it, I lost whose perspective I was getting or who was speaking or writing. And that made it a little bit difficult to follow at times. So I do wish I had read this one instead of listened to the audiobook. But nevertheless, I'm really glad that I read it. So those are 10, I think, memoirs that I've listened to recently, and maybe just some ideas you could take into Nonfiction November if you want to pick a memoir or two, or add an audiobook to your list. So I hope all of you enjoyed it, and I appreciate all of y'all being here, and I'll talk to all of y'all again soon. Thanks. Bye.